Hot or Cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Let's go ahead and get rolling on this right now. Caleb, Zakai Zeigler, first team All SEC. You got to be hot on that, right? He's one of the leaders.
Oh, yes. I'm very hot on Zakai Zeigler as first team All SEC. Congratulations to him. He may have had the most... I think it may be safe to say Zakai Zeigler had the most successful 4-year period winning-wise of any player in Tennessee basketball history. I'm not sure there's a close second.
Still stunning he's 5'9" and was able to do that. If I would have looked at him as a high school prospect, I would have said no chance. I mean, it's hard not to be hot on Zakai Zeigler.
That's hot.
All right, Chaz Lanier, second team All SEC. I'll go ahead and start. I'm cold on him because I thought Tennessee would get more out of him. I guess I expected the next Dalton Connect. Maybe that wasn't fair, but he never wanted to take it to the rack, and he's just started to do that recently. I think he falls back in his own habits in the NCAA tournament and settles for the outside jump shot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm cold on him too. Now I'm hot on him being second team All SEC, but scoring's the only thing he did, really. Until later in the year, he became really good at rebounding, but you don't ask your scoring guard to be a rebounder. That's not what you want from them. And he was 7th in the league in scoring. No, I'm sorry. He was 5th in the SEC in scoring points per game. But when it came to end SEC games, he was 7th. So, and that's after looking like he was going to set every record in the book in January. So I'm cold on him. I may even be cold on him being second team All SEC, to be honest, but that's a different story.
Wow. So you wouldn't even have him second team All SEC?
I think it's debatable.
He was the newcomer of the year. So I think a lot of people respected his game, but it just wasn't. Let's say if Connect was a 10 and that's what Tennessee needed, he was probably what, a 7?
Yes. Yes, I agree. Now I will say this. And not only that, I'm cold on that because I think the newcomer of the year should have very obviously been Trey Johnson at Texas. Now, he was the freshman of the year, Trey Johnson, but he also should have been the newcomer of the year. He averaged 20 points in SEC play. So
I get the feeling they divvy up those awards so more people get some recognition.
Communism? Is that what you're saying? They're trying to spread the wealth?
The SEC is communist. That's exactly.
The SEC is absolutely communist. They're trying to... Trey Johnson should have collected both awards.
Are you hot or cold on communism?
I'm cold on communism, obviously.
Yes, I'm cold on communism as well. Zeigler,
although the communists did help us win World War II. Got to give him credit for that, but still.
That was a long time ago. Zeigler, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. I'm just hot on the guy. I love him. I wrote a column that I wouldn't be surprised if Rick Barnes retires after this year because he had Zeigler, and I don't know that he wants to build back the whole thing. What are your thoughts on Zakai Zeigler?
That's hot.
I love Zakai Zeigler as a player. I totally understand where they're coming from with this decision. He was second in the SEC in steals in SEC play alone. And in overall play, he was 3rd. But I'm cold on it because of who we're about to talk about, who I think should have actually been SEC Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay, which would be Jahmai Mashack.
Yes. And Jahmai Mashack was... I'll just let you bring him up because the next one is Jahmai Mashack and Zakai Zeigler, both SEC All-Defense. We're hot on them, right? On SEC All-Defense. Both.
Yes.
Yes. They both belonged on SEC All-Defense. Jahmai Mashack, I think, should have been SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He doesn't get the stats that Zakai gets, but we're forgetting this. A lot of those stats, particularly with little guards, Dave, they come because Zakai gambles. Well, why is Zakai allowed to gamble? Because Mashack's there to clean up if he gets beat a lot of times. And so Zakai is going to get more stats, but Mashack plays like traditional defense that you just can't measure with stats, honestly.
Okay, this comment before we get to Caleb's major take that I think people are going to question a little bit. General Ursus say Chaz has been a disappointment. I can live with the fact he wasn't as good as Dalton, but I was expecting more from him. He disappears in clutch situations. He doesn't take the bull by the horns. A fair point. What happens in the NCAA tournament if Tennessee's down 1 and they need a bucket?
They go to Zakai because he's got the mental toughness. They can't even go to Chaz, or they go to Mashack, who hits the game-winning 3. And It's a bad situation. I mean, we're talking about a guy in Chaz Lanier who just threefold real quick. I'll bring it up. Against Vanderbilt, with needing a free throw to tie, Chaz Lanier missed. Against Kentucky, just took himself out of the game at home when Kentucky was shooting well and Tennessee wasn't. Didn't find other ways to score. And against Texas, a play was literally drawn up for him to score, and he passed it up. I've never heard of a scoring guard doing that. No. Taking all those things into account, he is a bit of a disappointment in that.
Sherman says, do you think that Zeigler has a shot in the NBA? Unfortunately, no. I mean, that's such a selective league. I mean, how many great players? I know Lofton had we're going to talk about his special a little bit later. And, but Lofton had the cancer issue, which was very serious. But, you know, if Chris Lofton doesn't get a real shot in the NBA, Zakai Zeigler's not getting a real shot in the NBA.
Yeah, and See, I think Chris Lofton didn't get a real shot because NBA GMs were stupid at the time, and before the Golden State era, they valued athleticism too much, the size and athleticism combination over the ability to shoot. So Chris Lofton and Ron Slay are two former Vols who, because NBA GMs were dumb, didn't get the shot they deserved in the pros. There's no way Zeigler could make it in the NBA, because if you're going to be 5'9", the athleticism is valuable, but you got to be able to be a sharpshooter at that point. Right. And Zakai Zeigler, as much as you could love Zakai Zeigler, he's not a sharpshooter. He's very, very streaky as a shooter. You can't have him, and he's not Allen Iverson level athletics. So no, he's not going to make it in the NBA. I mean, that is if you want to talk talent, like across all professional sports, the NBA is the most elite league of talent in all professional sports. It's actually almost unwatchable now because they're too darn good.
No, there's a lot of truth to that. All right. So lastly, did the Vols overachieve or underachieve with the
one quick thing?
Yes.
Because you missed one, which is Mashack, Field of 68 National Defensive Player of the Year. I'm hot on that, and he should have been SEC Defensive Player of the Year too.
Yeah, it is weird to me that one player was National Defensive Player of the Year, and the other was Conference Player of the Year. That didn't make a lot of sense.
No, it didn't make a lot of sense to me at all.
But that was the Field of 68. I bet they were really upset when they had to change that name, because when they went from 64 to 68, I'm sure they had to do that. All right, so Caleb's hot take. Did the Vols overachieve or underachieve with the talent they had?
Guys, I'm going to say it. Tennessee basketball underachieved this year with the talent it had. And that's not a knock on the players. That's not even a knock on Rick Barnes. It's just they could still make up for it in the tournament, but Tennessee and Auburn were the only two schools to have more than two players earn separate SEC awards. Now, Auburn had 4 players. Tennessee had 3. But Tennessee had, depending on how you want to look at the value of it, Tennessee could have been better represented, I guess, in all the SEC awards. And that makes a big difference, too, between the Defensive Player of the Year and the Newcomer of the Year. So Tennessee had the 2 players that were like the best at their roles. Auburn didn't have any of that. Auburn had the Player of the Year. Excuse me. Auburn did have the Player of the Year, but Tennessee had the Newcomer and the Defensive Player of the Year. So, and Tennessee had 2 all-SEC players in general, and Auburn had 1. So you could actually make the case Tennessee in the first and second team. You could make the case Tennessee was better represented in the SEC awards. Either way, they either should have finished first in the SEC or they should have finished second. They finished 4th. And they finished 4th because of a couple of losses they shouldn't have had. Losing at home to Kentucky is one that, I'm sorry, there's just no excuse for losing at home to Kentucky. You should not have lost that game. You can deal with losing to Kentucky on a road, but losing to Kentucky at home was just a bad look. And they shouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt on the road. I know it was on the road, but those 2 games they should have had back. And had they had those games back, they would be 14-4 in SEC play and tied with Florida for second in the SEC. And I wouldn't be saying this, but because they finished 4th, they underachieved.
I think they overachieved. Given the fact, now I'm not taking the roster totally preseason. I'm taking a couple of weeks into the season and what we learned. Darling Stone Dubar had personal issues and never turned into the player that we believed. Zakai Zeigler, we mentioned, is 5'9". Jahmai Mashack is limited offensively. Is that fair?
Yes.
I think they overachieved. I think they, or at least achieved what they should have. I mean, this team to be one of the top 4 teams in the SEC, I think is a I think it's a credit to Rick Barnes and what he was able to do, win with defense, win with toughness. Derek brings up Muggsy Bogues. Yeah, Muggsy Bogues was astonishingly quick, but I think they overachieved, Caleb.
Okay, see, I have a hard time with the over. I get your point. Now, the players individually may have overachieved, but I think you're missing 2 big ones. One, Darling Stone Dubar, you're right. That was an underachieving moment, never panned out, but we're missing a couple others. Even as the newcomer of the year, Dave, I think Chaz Lanier underachieved because of his lack of clutchness. I think that was an underachievement. And here's a big one I gotta bring up. Igor Milicic Jr. underachieved. SEC defenses really seemed to figure him out.
You know what was weird about late January, early February? Didn't you feel like he had kind of found his groove and he was going to be an impact player, and then he just kind of fell off the map?
I did, yeah, exactly. Just completely fell off. Was just kind of a forgettable player. So, and he wasn't a he could have been a much better rebounder in terms of NBA prospects. Chaz Lanier and Igor Milicic are the 2 best NBA prospects on this team, and I think both of them showed you reasons why you wouldn't want to draft them. Honestly.
Now, what about not having Carr and Estrella? Are you taking that into account? Because this team probably wins those 2 games that you mentioned if they have those 2 players and a little bit more depth.
I mean, if Carr and Estrella are out there, I would almost say they should win the SEC at that point. I think the reason I'm going underachieve is I'm saying the players that it's not the 3 players that earned all SEC awards. Those players didn't underachieve. It's that the players around them underachieved, if that makes sense. So you just brought up Darlington Dubar. He underachieved, dramatically underachieved. I think we have to call Igor Milicic Jr. an underachiever this year.
I think the common ground between you and me is you're going based off totally before the season started, right? I'm going like a month into the season after I've seen these guys. So I think that's kind of the rub. Is that fair?
That might be true. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Because I thought Darlington Dubar with him, I thought he was going to be elite, and I thought Tennessee was going to maybe not stay number 1, but stay a top 5 team the whole season. And that just didn't happen.
Okay. I wrote a column. I've just got this hunch. This is not a report. This is nothing I've heard, but I have a feeling that Rick Barnes is going to retire this year. I have a feeling that he doesn't want to rebuild with Zakai Zeigler. He's 70 years old. He'll be 71 this summer. I know he looks fantastic and he looks young, but what's your take on that? Would you be surprised if he retired?
I would be, but I'll tell you this. I'm a little more open to it than what I was a month ago. I thought this new age of college basketball was very conducive to him being successful, and it seemed like he's decided that he's not as into it. Because he had a quote where he said he had a quote about a month ago where he said the way Zakai plays is something that kept him wanting to keep coaching, basically was what he said. So without a Zakai or Jahmai, I don't know where that's going to go.
Let's dig into that tomorrow, because I believe Rick Barnes did such a good job this year and did such a good job for Tennessee that if I were Danny White and he wanted to retire, I'd try to talk him out of it. But more so, I'd put my money where my mouth is and I'd give him a lifetime contract. I mean, UCLA came after this coach. I mean, that's a pretty good sign that basketball circles appreciate him.